welcome to episode 5 of the Hard Truth About B2B E-Commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger of Trellis, and I'm here with Tim.
Hi, I'm Timothy Peterson, and I'm a client advocate for Trellis. Great to have you here today.
Absolutely.
So I'd be happy to dive in and talk about our sponsor a little bit. We're very proud to have a sponsor, PunchOut2Go. They're a global B2B integration company specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. Their solution can immediately reduce integration complexities for PunchOut catalogs, purchase orders, e-invoices, and other B2B sales order automation documents in order to accelerate your business results. And we're very happy to have them as our sponsor.
Absolutely. Quite a mouthful to explain them, but ultimately PunchOut2Go has been a great solution provider in the B2B e-commerce space for a lot of our clients, and Brady, their CEO, is just a great guy, so I recommend talking to them. And actually, with that being said, that kind of brings me to our guest, Nick, who I believe you guys are using them, correct? I think, as a company, been working with PunchOut2Go.
Yeah, we've worked with PunchOut2Go I personally have worked with them for, I think, maybe 6 or 7 years.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, Stran has been using PunchOut2Go for at least the last 2 or 3 as a solution for some of our clients.
Awesome.
Excellent.
So Nick, we met you in 2007. We're both based in Boston. I was excited to invite you because I felt like you just had a really good understanding of e-commerce operations, kind of the B2B side of e-commerce, which I think a lot of people don't really understand. Most people, when they see e-commerce, they see Shopify or, your basic, consumer goods. But I think you have a really good operational understanding of how the B2B side works. So, you've been the director of operations at Stran for quite a while now, but I'll kind of hand it over to you to kind of give your explanation of your background.
Yeah, sure. So I've been dealing with web-based projects and e-commerce since GeoCities and AngelFire, all the fun old school stuff. And over the last 15 years, I've focused mostly on promotional products and a lot of the operational part around getting those types of products, whether that's finding and sourcing a fulfillment location, special packaging that clients need, or customized e-commerce flow that runs through specific billing, any type of specific integration. So a lot of times when we get to the point where salespeople come to talk to me, we sit down and huddle and try to find the best solution.
Awesome. And I'm just kind of curious, what got you into, you're in more of a B2B environment. Have you thought about the B2C side, or was it the B2B environment that kind of felt like a better fit for you given your skill set, or you just kind of fell into it?
I think for the most part, kind of fell into it. Working in promotional products where there isn't a lot of direct customer access a lot of times. We're either working behind the scenes for clients, or even if we are upfront, running a trade show or conference, or if we show up there, we're on behalf of the client. Like, we are the client at that point. So it's always felt like it's more of B2B, even when we're doing more retail-based activities, whether that's for the website or in person. It's always for the client directly. So, I'm always looking at it from what does the client need from a B2B? How can we give them better service or give them a better product at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, let's kind of get into some of the topics that we wanted to address. One of the things that I think you guys have done very well for, like, you wouldn't consider yourself like a technology company. You're more a B2B distribution promo products company, but I think you guys have done a really good job overcoming some pretty difficult technical challenges. What was it like kind of like starting out and going through that? I know, I wasn't there when you guys initially started with Magento 2, but you guys started pretty early on with Magento 2, which in a lot of ways was a very early beta product and had a lot of bugs.
Yeah.
And we've helped with a lot of that, but, could you talk a little bit about what it was like kind of like advancing the company over the last 4 or 5 years technically and becoming, I would consider you guys pretty technically sound company for a non-technical focused company.
Yeah, I mean, challenging to especially at the start of Magento 2, like you said, for all those bugs through through the entire first version of Magento 2. A big part of what we're doing is when we're putting in these customized approaches, or we're building something that's very specific for one client, it tends to complicate the code base specifically for you guys, for Trellis, a lot. Because we have 3 different instances of Magento that are all live on production. Each one of them has between 10 and 50 sites for clients, and a lot of times we need a single solution on one of those sites, and while that's great, maybe we can roll that out to some other clients down the line. It's more challenging because it's usually extremely specific, the needs to that one client, and we also have to make sure to work in a way and go through the proper channels so that we don't end up breaking all the other sites while we roll out the new essential product.
Yep. So you guys have taken like a very, I guess, thoughtful approach to how you're kind of like customizing all the infrastructure that you have, and being aware of like the ramifications of those customizations can lead to potential maintenance issues down the road. So.
Yeah, definitely. We started in Magento 2 with just one instance, and we tried to kind of tack everything onto that. There were a lot of issues for a lot of different reasons. There's no one main perpetrator. It was Magento's fault, or it was the server, or it was what we did to it, or anything like that. It's just how we started. So with your help, with the help of Trellis and your project folks, kind of remapping that architecture in a way that would give our clients a little bit better service. It would be more manageable, and we took several months to just kind of roadmap that out and make sure that it was exactly what we really what we needed as a company to grow, but also that we could provide our clients with the best possible solutions.
Yep. And I think you guys, one of the things that might have helped you guys kind of get over the hurdle and grow the business so much is that you guys have been very patient with this evolution. Could you speak to that? I think that's, so I really want to help some of the B2B companies out there. The reason I'm asking this is to give some context to this. There are a lot of B2B organizations that are like, family run. They might do $100 million and like almost none of it's online. And then they're kind of trying to do this like one shot, like I want to, my 10-year-old site, I want to rebuild it and be like Granger, or they're from what I see, it seems like they're trying to kind of like skip too many steps. And I think you guys have done a very thoughtful kind of iterative, starting in 2016 or so, this evolution. So could you speak to that a little bit and how you guys have kind of put thought into that?
Yeah, I would say as for what we did, and also advice from anybody who is kind of either starting to or continuing on with B2B commerce, is just take it slow. There's whatever ideal situation you think is the end result, you can't get there all at once, and it's probably the wrong place. So make those small incremental changes of, making sure that your back end is set up exactly how you need it. Make sure that your shipping integration, any integration with fulfillment partners or vendors is really locked down, because that's where you're going to end up spending a lot of manual time if it's not. And you don't need to do everything at once. If you know that you're working on a solution, and we've done this quite a lot of, found a way to automate certain tasks, knowing that we're going to have to spend, maybe a month or two doing it manually in the meantime, but that also helps us figure out a little bit more of what that end result should be once we get that developed. So I would just say take it slow, and also listen to your clients about not what they want, but what doesn't work for them.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Let me just interject for a second. I think you touched on something that is really a global topic, not just in B2B, but also in B2C as well. I mean, the idea of iteration and kind of looking ahead, but also just making sure that you're continually moving. The pace of change isn't going to slow down, and just being ready to change, in small ways, is as important or more important than planning for change 3 years down the road and not really changing much in between. I mean, so it's really something that I think it's a conversation that everyone has had to have, especially in recent months, about being ready for change and talking about how those processes work in your business. And so, I'm really glad that that's something that's been part of the picture for you guys for so long.
Yeah, I think you brought up something that's really, really valuable when you kind of dig into it. It's like you mentioned how in some cases you guys are okay with doing some manual processes for a month or two while you're working on some automation to improve those down the road. So you have this thoughtful approach of like, not necessarily trying to build the feature for everything. You're okay with some kind of manual intervention, or maybe getting something up and running to use it, and then down the road you'll kind of like automate or improve it later. And I think that makes a lot of sense. A lot of companies might try and do all their integrations on the first project, and it's like way too overwhelming. Maybe start with like the one key one that matters and push the other ones to post-launch. Or you see where I'm getting at with that?
Yeah. Also, a lot of if you try to do a bunch of stuff all at once and you don't really understand how they might interact, you might end up, causing more pain down the line. You're going to have to try to unwind later, instead of taking it step by step and really understanding, how each part of a system is going to interact with the next part of the system. Is pretty important. We have a lot of clients that ask for, maybe they want one very specific feature, and on the surface it sounds, pretty benign and not like a big deal, but it has a lot of lasting effects, maybe for how we could interact with our warehouse, or how we could process payments, or something along those lines that, at the beginning, people may not that they're not thinking about them, just may not be aware that there's those kind of dependencies in the system. So just keep that in mind, and you'll always miss something, and something will always pop up that surprises you, or that you forget about.
Good point. Yeah, so I think we can keep talking about the technical hurdles forever, but I want to move on.
Well, I think
probably should have like a podcast for that.
It's going to keep coming up no matter what, because the technical hurdles are common enough. But one of the other topics that's of interest to a lot of our listeners, and something that's certainly out there, that I talk about on almost a daily basis, is really about success and failure. It's not just the success or failure of your specific business or of your clients' businesses, but really, what defines a successful, B2B e-commerce operation versus the ones that fail. So, is it investment? Is it, processes? Is it, openness to innovation, I mean, or all of the above. I mean, so how do you define success or failure, Nick, in a B2B e-commerce operation?
I would probably define it as, I think adaptation is a pretty good term. So much has changed in, not just B2B e-commerce, but e-commerce, the world, technology over just the last few years. In our industry, we see a lot of either incumbent sites or some of our vendor sites where, it's definitely a B2B e-commerce solution. It was built from scratch in the early aughts at some point, and it worked and it was functional and it wasn't pretty, and they're still using the exact same thing. And that, that's great that it works. That's, one of the primary reasons that you need to do it. But that's not really enough anymore. And especially, if the last few months have taught us anything, the ability to be mobile and to conduct business on the go wherever you are, on whatever device you have, is increasingly important. And if your e-commerce solution is stuck in a desktop-only mode, or you're still toggling back and forth between a web version or a desktop version, you're way behind the curve. And even if you can manage your business through that and people use it because the site is functional, you can't grow with that. You can't. It's very difficult, and it will be increasingly difficult to bring on new clients. Consumers are super sophisticated. Everybody's looking for that Amazon-like experience. And while we may know some of the technical reasons of why that's not exactly doable for a lot of clients, specifically in B2B, that's what they want. So you have to get them as close to that as you can, so that it's actually usable.
Let me just ask one quick follow-up in this, because it's not really on the questions I think we were preparing, but it came up again in another conversation with a colleague of mine. So, mobile, obviously critical. If you aren't able to do a lot of the B2B e-commerce functions on mobile, then there's a problem. But one of the things that I'm fascinated by are really sort of purpose-specific or sales team specific apps that some companies are now creating. They're just really spinning off, these very specific functions. Is this something that you do? Do you have like very specific tools that are available for only specific purposes, or is everything under one umbrella?
We actually try to specify as much as possible, because while we do have a baseline e-commerce solution, which is, here's your basic site and we'll give you fulfillment and we can, offer credit card functions. Every one of our clients is set up differently. And because we pride ourselves on being that solution for people, is we don't necessarily make people do things our way. We say, all right, how does for instance, if we're doing some kind of monthly consolidated billing from e-commerce where we're just taking in orders, we really need to be able to adapt and understand, what does their finance team need to be able to process things properly on their side? Like where are all of the potential roadblocks and bottlenecks? And if we can kind of front load that and bring in information smooth in the beginning, hopefully the rest of the process should be relatively seamless.
Gotcha. So I want to just change gears a little bit so that we have time to get up to all the topics. So you've been doing this for, let's call it, at Stran, call it about 5 years now. Where do you see kind of like the next 5 years going? I think it's pretty hard to predict after that. We'll have automated cars or flying cars in 20 years, who knows? But in the next, like, 2020 to 2025, like you said, everyone's kind of trying to catch up to Amazon. Is that where you see kind of the B2B e-commerce market going? More people trying to evolve in that direction and create this seamless experience?
To an extent, we see a lot of people who, again, we sell product as our main, that's our business. So we also have quite a lot of information and background about inventory, what types of inventory works and inventory levels. And we see from an e-commerce perspective, more and more people wanting to go some form of on-demand, whether that's some kind of print on-demand option or very low inventory. It's very rare that people come to us and say, "Hey, we're going to use 1,000 t-shirts over the next year. Let's get 1,000 t-shirts." They much more would prefer to say, "All right, well, we don't really know what we want, so from a pricing perspective, inventory per piece is cheaper than printing things on demand, one at a time or in small batches. But if you're not sure what you're going to use, it may be a smarter option, at least in the short term, if not the long term." So I definitely see that. We get that question a lot from a lot of clients, a lot of RFPs, and just a lot of general conversations with existing clients as well about how we can help them manage their inventory exposure.
Gotcha. So and that could probably apply to all B2B. I mean, instead of buying, 1,000 of these things that might take you 3 years to use, you see a trend of people wanting to buy almost in the increments that they're actually using the product.
Yeah, and we do our best to get them the best price for the lowest quantity to reduce, everybody's inventory exposure. And if we can print it on demand and we're able to take those couple extra days to do that, then that's great. We'll try to, use that as a solution, or some kind of hybrid where some of the stuff's in stock and some of it's made on demand. Really depends what the client is, what the solution is, but what's gonna help them in the long run.
Do you see them like forcing them to kind of commit to like maybe the total purchase, like, hey, you're gonna commit to the 1,000 t-shirts from a price point, but we'll fulfill them over time? Like, is that something that's part of your negotiations to kind of lock up the larger order and bulk value? Or
Yeah, it could. I mean, when we're pricing out, whether it's product or a program in general, which is what we're calling our B2B e-commerce solution for a client, we need to know what their usage is going to be. What have they spent in the past? What are they planning on spending? What types of products, so that we can get them the best pricing. We can work with our vendors to make sure that there's going to be stock available, or whatever we need to get in stock, but also so that we have a really good idea of their business and how best to service them. So I think getting that kind of information up front and just having an honest conversation with the client of, hey, we know that you said you spend maybe $250,000 a year on promotional products, and that's great, but it's not wise to buy $250,000 for the products that you think you're going to buy. Like, let's take it slow. Reorders don't take that long. And just make sure that they're aware of how inventory can be fulfilled and what kind of timelines that takes.
Well, this is it's such a critical topic, of course, during this whole COVID-19 crisis. I work with a lot of sports-related businesses, and when sports teams are not playing, and yet people pre-ordered tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of specific jerseys and hats and whatever, connected to all kinds of events that were supposedly coming up, right? It becomes a crisis. Like, what do you do with all that? What do you do with all that inventory? So, moving closer to on-demand is a necessity. I mean, I've worked with fashion businesses, health and wellness businesses. All these kinds of businesses are looking at this in one way or another, and it's I think more important for everyone to think about in the next 5 years. Couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's a really good point, and I think that kind of ties into the next questions that we have. So maybe let me just kind of skip around here, but do you see that being the challenge? Like, I wanted to touch on what you see as the biggest challenge for distributors, and do you see that being the challenge of like it's no longer, especially with coronavirus and all the state of current affairs, we maybe don't have the luxury of getting these massive purchase orders that you might have gotten in the past, and now it's more about being nimble and being able to like kind of create this like flexible delivery model, whether you sell promo products or toilet paper, or, you know what I mean? Like it could really be any B2B industry. People don't want to necessarily be sitting on tons of inventory and tons of cash if they don't need to.
Yeah, but inventory's always been, probably the highest cost for any business. And it's always a discussion with our clients of, is this something that we want to take into inventory? Do we need to? In our industry, because we're working with, vendor partners throughout the US and overseas, a fair amount of our products are usually made on demand, or specifically printed for us. So a lot of times what we'll do is set up a site for a client and do like an ordering window. Maybe they're doing, a back to the office kit for post COVID-19. We can collect all of that information up front through an e-commerce tool, make sure that we're collecting from the users, whether that's their badge ID or cost center, or whatever information the client needs, and then being able to produce exactly what's been ordered. So we're not holding any inventory. We're only producing the exact amounts that have been ordered. And if we need to, drop ship all of those to individuals' homes, which is definitely the case, these days, also having those conversations about freight and shipping and how that's going to tie into the overall project. Because instead of a couple shipments to a couple headquarters, now you're talking about hundreds or thousands of shipping charges that can really start to cut into budgets.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just, definitely something that we do our best to try to to educate clients if we need to, or just, have thoughtful discussions about what's right, and will help them achieve what they're looking for in the end.
Yeah. So if people are taking less larger orders and more smaller orders, then you have to worry about all the shipping costs overhead. So it's like a kind of a balance of like, not too many shipments, but also not such big orders that they're just sitting on inventory forever. So
yeah, we're seeing a lot of discussions currently about like virtual trade shows and virtual conferences.
We did one already.
Yeah, I saw that.
Been pretty great, actually. I've done a bunch of them in the past few months. I think I've gotten more out of them than I had from a lot of the in-person ones I've done in the last few years.
Yeah, they're great. But a big part of what some people love about those conferences is all the free swag that you can pick up at different booths.
Exactly.
And none of that exists right now. So we've been talking with a bunch of companies about kind of helping to put that physical piece into whatever they're working on overall. And a lot of times that's kind of, building a little pop-up shop on the side where people can select a couple items, whether they're buying it, whether they got a promo code for it, doesn't really matter. Just collecting their information so that that company can send out something physical to the person, as a touchstone, also as a reminder, like, hey, we had this conversation, you were part of this event, here's the reminder. And we're definitely seeing more and more of that, just over the last few weeks, and probably through the end of the year, definitely.
So let me just ask this as a segue, because there's in one of the conferences, a trade show. It was a virtual trade show that I did. There were virtual swag opportunities. So what you would do is, if you were signing up for different things in a booth, you would be able to get, credits, let's say $5 Amazon credits, that could then be applied later on for specific goods. So are you involved in that whole ecosystem as well?
Yeah, we can do it. We can do it in a couple different ways. Because there are a lot of those virtual trade show. There are companies now that are, essentially running all of that technology for them.
Yep.
So whether they're collecting all of that data and then essentially passing us, name, address, and either quantity, where it's, like you said, like you're kind of earning trade show bucks as you go along, or just creating a store that kind of lets people who are registered have access. We can plug ourselves into, any place kind of along that line of either front loading and collecting information, or just being the repository of what products do people need to send out, and then we'll handle all the back end operations from there.
Yeah, I mean, and unless Isaiah had another question here, I mean, what I was just going to ask just a little bit about what you thought about B2B, what they are learning or might learn from B2C, because I think at least in my personal experience in the last few years, B2B has played catch up, right? B2C has often been in the lead in certain tech and tools or concepts. So do you feel that that's still the case? And if so, is there anything that B2B can still learn from B2C?
Yeah, I do think that's still the case to a certain extent. And definitely historically, I feel like the gap is closing a little bit. And most of that is due to, advancement in more plug and play options, a ton of no code tools that are out there where people can help to do more complicated things themselves, where they didn't necessarily have the ability to do that before. But I think two of the biggest places where B2B commerce can learn or pick up from, the more direct to consumer side is probably in design overall, mostly website design. B2B sites are not known for being slick and smooth. And there's no reason that they don't have to be. I mean, there's certainly a lot of things that you would see on a consumer site that may not apply to B2B, like certain types of review systems or social media sharing, or, a lot of different things that may not actually apply, but there's no reason that different types of design elements or call outs or things that could be helpful to the user or the client can't also be incorporated into the e-commerce experience through that. And the other part I would say is customer service, where I feel like Stran does a really good job at customer service, and we're extremely responsive. In general, I feel like if you're dealing in B2B commerce, whether that's, for whatever, and I deal with a lot of different vendors primarily through either commerce or live chat or whatever. I feel like that level of customer service and stepping up and maybe front loading some of that information, like tracking or order status, it's not quite to the level of B2C. And I feel like that there's definitely a little more of a gap that can be closed there overall for the whole B2B commerce industry.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on both of these counts. I think design folks are catching up. I think there was this tendency to overcomplicate in B2B that's moving away, and I'm very, very happy about that. I mean, that's something I've seen over and over. It's like, why am I filling out this form and then this form? And then it's like, I didn't understand why that wasn't cleaned up earlier. And the second thing, you're right about service. I had a conversation with a B2B player, a pretty substantially sized one, and they were really wondering why they should have, people available, for service 24/7. And at their size, when you're in the tens of millions to hundreds of millions in revenue, I don't know why you're even asking that. Like, there are people all around the world who may want to be talking to you at that level and at any time. And you just got to consider these things now. And they've been givens in B2C for quite a while.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point there where like, I think B2C companies, the reason they're so far ahead in this is that it's their lifeblood. Like they're like, how do I grow sales? Oh, let's increase conversions. Let's do better customer service and more people will buy from the site. And they see it as like this immediate way to gain more sales and grow customer lifetime value. Like with B2C, I see companies are very like metric driven, like get more traffic, increase conversions, increase lifetime value. And a lot of those things that you're talking about, it's like they're proven tactics that help with that. And I think B2B organizations haven't quite caught up to that from an analytics standpoint because they're not thinking like, oh, if I have better customer service, I'll get better lifetime value for my e-commerce store. Because they're still thinking in the sales rep mind of like, oh, well, my sales reps still need to like call you to get the sale. You know, they haven't quite thought of it as this just e-commerce sale per se from an account base. So that's kind of, I think, what's holding people back. But I think as the percentage of sales goes online more, like from B2B, you know, going, you know, it was like less than 10%, you know, now we're getting, I think, above 10%. You'll see more of that because they'll realize like, hey, we got to do this. Otherwise, you know, we're losing conversions on these sites. People are dropping off and the analytics will get, you know, more important for them.
Well, by 2030, I want to have drone delivery to my house. Yeah. But by 2030, I was saying, Isaiah, I just want to have drone delivery to my house of everything. You know, I'll just push a button.
Yeah, there you go. We don't
arrive. Maybe even by 2027. You know, so give it a few more years.
We can all just live at home forever, right? I think I saw a funny stand-up comedian where he's like, America, the land of the free and the land of never leave your house. So this is before coronavirus.
There you go.
So, sorry guys, I think I'm getting a little bit of feedback. The video's kind of chopping up a little bit.
Yeah, you froze a couple times. I wasn't quite sure what was going on there.
Yeah, sorry about that. Might be my connection. But yeah, Nick, this was awesome. I really appreciate your insight. You know, we want people to continue to get informed and make smart decisions with B2B e-commerce, and I think you're helping people with one more stepping stone towards that. So you know, we want everyone to stay tuned for episode 6. We actually have Jeremy from Celigo joining us, which is an exciting iPaaS solution. So we're going to get more into the integrations and some of the challenges that B2B companies face. But yeah, thanks so much, Nick. Any last closing words before we part ways?
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's been a pleasure, and we're good.